7:35, calling the September 2nd Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Let's open with a roll call. Looks like we have perfect attendance.
Good. Robert Tantillo. Kat Hlotke. Anthony Bellina.
Present.
Rich Minshaw.
Here.
Diane Gormley Barnes.
Here.
Barb Lucenti.
Here.
And Chairman Greg Skovich.
Present. Now, if everybody could stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item of business is to approve last month's meeting minutes. Andres, thanks a ton for sending those out early for everybody's review. I'm assuming everybody received it. And to the extent anybody has any questions, comments, suggested improvements, speak now or after you've reviewed it.
Yeah, take the whole thing.
And after we've reviewed it, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the August 2025 minutes.
Mr. Minshaw motioned to approve the August meeting minutes for the Planning Commission hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'm going to give it to Diane Gormley Barnes as the second. All in favor of approving in its current form the August meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. No public hearings tonight, although thanks everybody for coming out for the public comments. I suspect I have a sense of what we're here for. Thank you, Plan Commissioners, for also being here for this all-important subject. I think what we're going to do now is move to new business, which should sound very familiar, as it is something that we heard last month regarding the conversion of a garage in Acacia to a living space. And now we have the actual papered up ordinance that we will review, consider, and determine whether or not it's in a form that we can motion for approval and subsequently send it to the village board for final approval and adoption. So to everybody take a look at the ordinance, and do you feel that it appropriately covers what we discussed and in spirit approved last month? Andres, how did you arrive at a method with which we can monitor this for the change of title and the potential of reverting it back to a garage, and it doesn't carry with the land, it only carries with the petitioner?
I haven't had a chance to research into that a little further. So the methods currently, as I stated before, would be, so anytime if the water bill's out there, we'll flag it in BSNA, but also we'll, if Acacia, of course, will have it, and the owners will have it as well. So trying to keep that in the loop. As I said, I'll reach out to our attorney about it to see if we can, if there is something to do with lien or recording it so it shows up in a title search on that. But I'm not currently, like I said, I haven't had experience with that before, so I don't really want to opine on whether or not that's something that can be done. Or something that I can research into it, but I don't know if it's something that is generally recorded like that.
Does Acacia do anything when you sell a house? There's, hey, you got to check in with the association has to approve you or anything along those lines? No.
I don't know, but Ashbrook.
Ashbrook does?
I believe
You know,
I believe
Acacia
Acacia does do something of that sort, just because we've talked to them before, like about dues and that type of sort. So I think they do some sort of like checkout at the end, but once again, I'm not severely confident about that.
Right. Okay.
I think for Ashbrook, everything that's been worked on has gone through the Ashbrook board
And
approval. And then by the time it gets to village, if that's what's necessary, and then that,
That's also approved. So to revert back for some exception, that part I don't know.
I'm just trying to prevent any surprises with the next property owner.
I think what we do with fences that are temporarily up or grandfathered in, we created some type of provision that they would have to come down after the property was sold, and the real estate agent would then be somewhat aware of through some communication that we would provide.
Okay. I mean, I see we do have restoration in black and white in the ordinance, which is good.
Yeah, that's just copied straight out of our municipal code as well with it. And I said, I know Indian Ridge previously had a reasonable accommodation for a ramp, and that when that person was no longer in residence there, then it was removed and restored as well.
Got it. Any questions of Andres or any suggestions to improve this ordinance as it's written? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve it in its form for recommendation to the board for formal approval.
So move.
Commissioner Minshall, motion to approve the ordinance in its current form. Any seconds?
I second.
Ms. Hatley, second the motion. I think we'll do a voice. Voice or yay, nay?
You could do a voice, and if then there's any nays, or if you would like to do a roll call, we could do a roll call. But it's up to you. Up to you.
Let's see how we do with yays and the nays. All in favor of approving ordinance number 205-13, granting a reasonable accommodation variation to allow for the conversion of an enclosed garage into a family room at 147 Cascadia Drive, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
nay,
Okay. All right. Well, let's do a roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Tantillo.
Yes.
Commissioner Hlatke.
Yes.
Commissioner Bailina.
no,
Commissioner Minshaw.
Yes.
Commissioner Gormley Barnes.
No.
Commissioner Lucenti.
Yes.
Chairman Greg Skovich.
Do I vote even though we have a majority?
Yes, you're a voting member, so you vote.
And passing is majority.
Yes, passing is majority.
Chairman Scovich votes yes in favor of recommending for approval ordinance number 2015-13.
Then 5-2, the motion carries. My math is good. It's been bad the last couple times.
I think you're good. And now, moving on, no other new business? All right. Now let's continue into our old business, in which we will continue our discussion of residential fence regulations from last month. Andres, if I could pose upon you to open the discussion. After that, we'll do a zoning code items to review from Safe Built, so that'll likely just be an update from you. And then finally, anything that's on our minds. But if you want to set the stage for what we're here doing tonight and what we're doing in future meetings.
Oh, okay. As discussed previously, we are going to be looking at any other follow-ups from August, and then also discussing any possible survey instrument that we might be sending out for the, getting additional public comment besides just a public hearing. So that would be that's our tentative schedule tonight. Now, I'll address would you like to do the follow-up questions first? Because there was some information I was providing.
That would be terrific.
Okay. All right. So there was some information that I was asked to provide. I was not able to get all of it in time, unfortunately. But I will. If you look at what page was that on? Page 2. I put a handy agenda and packet summary in there so we can all follow along on the page numbers. Commissioner Gormley Barnes had asked if they could get a list of all the pools, which would then have fences in the village, and then any special uses fences. These are strictly for those fences that have special uses, so the fences along Joliet and behind Brookside are not included, nor are commercial fences, and then any other special use fences, so like the ones in Bartlett Estates are included, and that's on what page was that? 29. So you can see the information that is there. I listed them out. So there's a significant number. Now, if you look at the table on page 29 to kind of run through it, those with permit numbers or have permit numbers. Those that don't have permit numbers are those we didn't find that had them. If they have a special use, that is what the ordinance number is. And then we tried putting in a date so you can see when they were approved. This combines both special uses for fences and pools at the same time, which is what the last column is. It says types, different types of things of those sort. So there's that information for that. You can see where they're spread out in the village. Right there. If someone has a pool and it's not on this list, please don't send it to me. I assume that it's good. I can see that already. Somebody like, well, my neighbor has a pool. Well, yeah. Additionally, on page 31, in this I don't know how it came out pretty well. Luckily, I'm printing. I think I cut off a little bit. Diane had also asked for those properties that would touch roads that are not controlled by the village, which in the village of Indian Head Park, that is Plainfield Road, Wolf Road, Joliet Road, and the tiny little bit of Willow Springs Road. Notably, if you look at page 31, that has the most properties that are touching it. I excluded the HOA properties because the fact that the properties that, well, except for the one accidentally I clicked on in Edgebrook, the properties that are in the HOA, any fences put up would be on HOA common area property, so it's not the individual parcel owners. So you can see that those are the ones. Diane had also asked for separating them between front yard and side and or rear yard. I was not able to get to that. The person who was working on that, Jill, who's our front office assistant, who's also a graphic designer. Unfortunately, we've been very busy, but also the fact that she fell ill today. Started last night and today, so I wasn't able to finish the graphic. So that beautiful blue and yellow is what Cook County looks like when you take a screenshot of it. That's Cook County GIS. Luckily enough for Cook County GIS, if you keep going in the following pages, you can see all the PIN numbers and all the addresses that are as part of that. There's several on there, right? And then the following couple of screenshots, I just took them because if I put them all on the same map, it would be very hard to read. But you can see the ones on Willow Springs Road on page 34. There's 2 properties there on 65th Place that would have side yards. And then the same exactly on page 35, you'd see the ones off Arrowhead Trail, which would also have side yards on there. Part of the discussion also was asked page. You should go to page 37 before you go to page 36. Page 37 is a very pretty rendering, and when I say that, I'm being sarcastic, of what I threw together at one point in time of the HOAs in the village for our own edification on there. So you can see the different colors of HOAs. If you're wondering what the kind of green color is that's not pastel, that's actually our parks. I was using that for references for our new members. But this is to illustrate which ones are fall under HOAs and which ones of those would not fall under HOAs. And then if you go back up to page 36, you'll also see that there are 2 PUDs that are not HOAs. That is Timber Ridge Court, which is a PUD, and some of it on Sequoia Lane. And then also on 45 acres is also a PUD. Though neither of those are controlled by HOAs or any type of association. So those would also hypothetically be allowed for them on there. So that is the extra information we have to that was requested to kind of looking at outlining my assumption is where they possibly could go, but also give a better picture of the landscape, for lack of a better pun, of where the fences could go in the village.
I thought it was a terrific pun.
Thank you.
Diane, thanks for the questions.
There are a few things also. I apologize. There was one question you'd asked about dog runs, where they're allowed in the village. We wouldn't normally permit those, but dog runs would be considered a structure, and we don't allow structures that are not put in specifically in the village code to be in rear yards. So a dog run is not one of the listed structures, therefore it would not be allowed in the rear yard.
Okay, I recall when we were addressing this issue the last time, there's somewhere in the zoning code, there's the ability to fence off a limited space adjacent to your home or something. I mean, it's foggy to me now. I haven't read it for years, but there's something like that, right?
There was something in the code when we were discussing about fences, the fence variation, a few months ago, whenever we were doing it. There is allowed for enclosures for animals not exceeding 75 square feet, but it also must, I'm just doing off of this memory, but it also must be attached to the rear side of the home.
Right.
So it's essentially a dog kennel, for lack of a better term. It's 75 square feet is not very large either. So, but there's nothing about dog runs. Now, if we're talking about a line run between 2 trees, not really a structure. But if you were to put up 2 poles, that would be more considered a structure, and we would not allow those. It's considered an accessory structure, which would not be allowed in any of the rear yards. Because our code is currently very restrictive about what we allow. Hence the whole garden box, garden fences, trellis debates from yesteryears. So that was the information that was requested that I was able to provide. So far, I'm going to keep working on better maps of sorts, so that's more, it's a better graphic than elsewise. Oh, my apologies. One last thing. Diane had also requested where fences would be where residential would intersect non-residential, so the commercials. So that would be Brookside, where there is a fence. That would also be Joliet Road, because it does abut zoning-wise to the triangle, which is not commercial. And the other ones we were looking at would be Heritage Center. It's zoned residential, but there's actually a fence currently there. And then also in the new zoning code, if we do adopt it, and the village hall becomes what we considered institutional or governmental, then it would also not be it would be a non-residential that would abut it. So hypothetically speaking, there could be a fence here. Also hypothetically speaking, it could be in our open spaces as well. So Sacagawea Park, Arrowhead Point, and Black Hawk Park could technically have fences as well. And going off of memory, the gentleman who is at the back of Black Hawk Park off of Howard, he has a fence, and part of the discussion when we've been doing at 6500 Howard, is that it? I'm trying to zone. Yep, thank you. Part of the discussions when they were talking about that location and using part of his property for water main, part of the discussions was to allow him to have that fence to separate Black Hawk Park, also to never use it for a sidewalk. I'm still working on getting that background information all to you in a manner that's not, that's easy digestible, I should say, so. Is there any question on any of those? I'm more than happy to answer them, or if there's anything else that now you're looking at that going, I would like to know that information. Like, is there something jumps out? Let me know now, and I'm gonna take notes, or feel free to message me later.
I got hopefully a softball, but the improvements that they're contemplating for Wolf Road, are they able to do that within the current right-of-way, or are they expanding beyond the limits of the current right-of-way?
There would be some, when they're doing Wolf Road, if they do Wolf Road, they would be they'd be expanding upon the current right-of-way at least as much for construction. They would need some construction to put equipment and drive-through and that. I believe in some areas, having looked at the previous Strand maps that are actually back there, that they're taking some right-of-way on either side of the road. I don't remember how much, and it's not been finalized yet. But I believe that there was some footage that would be taken. I can always look it up at wolfroadstudy.com if you want me to.
Thanks.
Cool.
Just one point of clarification. I recall when we were talking about the fence issue years ago, one of the reasons why there is a fence at the former Heritage Center property was because the village had put an off-street parking lot there, I believe, right? I mean, the explanation we heard at the time was that was a public property that actually had an off-street parking lot, and that was why that fence was there, to kind of protect the adjacent homeowners from, headlights and car activity and things like that, versus, in other, like Sacagawea Park or other parks where there isn't a fence boundary between the park and the adjacent home, but at the Heritage Center was because of that parking lot. So I suppose whatever the future plan for that property is might affect, the appropriateness of the fence staying there. But I really appreciate you pulling all this information together. I know I peppered you with all kinds of questions. My thought in being able to sort of visualize where there are currently fences, and where the code might currently allow fences, or where we might want to consider allowing them, was just to be able to support people being able to look at a map like that before they before they enter their responses in a survey, understanding, like, if I were to say I'm, strongly approving or sort of approving or neutral or whatever about a particular proposal, where would it actually be applicable? If we allowed it, where would that potentially occur? Rather than asking people to respond without really understanding the extent, like if we allow people to put a fence, along a rear property that faces a busy street, how many houses would it be? And based on this, it's like, there's 25 or 30 or something homes in the village where that condition exists. And we would consider, if we were to do that, those are the homeowners that it would potentially impact, just to be able to kind of let people see the where and the level of impact it might have. But it would be helpful as well, I think, even for basic things like, being able to say the village currently allows fences around pools. And that exists on, 25 homes in the village, and here's where they are, and if someone were to put in a pool, they could put in a fence. Like, that's allowed now. But to ask if we're going to ask people how they feel about that, we just need to be able to show them a visual of where that occurs.
I think it's an excellent idea. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's an excellent idea to remind everybody of the baseline, how it exists today. You're right. If you have a pool, you can have a fence. If your yard backs up against a commercially zoned district, you have access to a rear yard fence. So I think that, for the survey, perhaps a tutorial on what we are allowed to do today to set the baseline. Because if you ask somebody, do you think we should change the code? Well, 95% of people don't know what they are allowed to do today.
And that's why I think it's relevant. It's relevant, too, to be able to say currently you could enclose a 75 square foot space off your back door, if you wanted to. That's allowed under the code. Is that enough? I mean, maybe we think about making it a little bigger. Like, I don't know. I mean, that there's this whole continuum of potential solutions that we could think about, and we have to gauge people's level of interest or level of, opposition to things like that before we could really make a decision.
Can I ask you a question? Since you brought up the Sacagawea Park, I assume the Sacagawea Park is a wood fence. Like, do you remember how you arrived at that material? Like, how did the fence come about?
Oh, I think at the Heritage Center property. I don't know how long do you even recall, Bob, how long that fence has been there? As long as the parking lot's been there, I
mentioned
guess.
I remember it being
this-
grandfathered in, that's the only thing. Like, it came up for a discussion point, but then it was grandfathered in because it
Because of the
existed
parking.
before we
Yeah.
took steps to validate it.
Okay.
From the from the February 14th, 2014 meeting minutes, I was looking through my slapped together stuff that's not pretty enough to be publicly out there. When discussing it about the Heritage Center fence, Commissioner O'Malley stated that when the village installed the fence on the back side and along the side of the Heritage Center, and it was so close to Wolf Road, we had to take a second, he asked why there was ever a fence installed in a residential area. It was noted because there is an asphalt circular driveway around the building and a home behind the Heritage Center. The fence was installed to provide screening and for safety. Now, that's not when it wasn't installed, but that was 11 years ago, was the reasoning given.
Screening, okay.
And I do remember, I actually have spoken to the gentleman that's house is right there, and then, part of that was what it was said for, is because his house is also very close to the lot line, just because the topography of how that lot is. It's very narrow and then widens out on that. So I do remember in 2018, they thought about taking that fence down, and then that decision was very quickly reversed.
Andres, talk to me about pages 38 through 46 of our packet.
Pages 38 through 46 of our packet was provided by Commissioner Anthony Bellina as possible questions for a survey. I included them in here because I think they were, looking at them, they're very good. My personal opinion in looking at these would be to narrow it down, or as kind of the headings here are in there, maybe split it up into multiple different types of surveys as about it. Some of this is cost and implementation and these types of things, which are more technical questions we wouldn't really survey people on. But definitely for, looking at, aesthetic and design, I think that would be a nice discussion point, possibly other forms to get input. But if we're looking at general opinion on fences, those first kind of 5 questions on there are very, very, or I think are good as to gauge whether or not the decision should be to go forward for fences or not. Because we don't want to ask somebody the question about what should fences look like if the commission's recommendation is, well, we shouldn't add fences. It wouldn't, cart before the horse, essentially. So I said, Commissioner Bellina had provided these. I think they're good. They're good questions. In general, some of these questions are things that I hadn't even thought about, and so I included them in there to also help prompt discussion out there. As I said, most generally speaking, for surveying, you don't want to add more than 10 questions, and you don't want 10 questions that have like 4 subparts either. You want to keep it very short, very, very clear. And it really comes down to is how hard is the question for you to answer. If it's 30 questions, but they're rank it 1 to 4, those are pretty easy. If you start asking open-ended questions, then it's a little bit more difficult, and people will stop taking the survey after that. So, these first 5 questions. Some of them, like I said, we could tweak some of them, but definitely some of them are very good about opinions of whether or not we should allow them or not allow them. So.
Thanks, Anthony. This is great. I'm going to go a little bit farther, and this is really good stuff. I do agree it probably needs to be trimmed a little bit so we keep people focused, but
Fair.
it sure is a great start. And you're certainly thinking of things that taken for granted.
They're great. Like I said, they're great, if nothing else, to provoke thought. What are these types of things? Are we, question number 42 was something that I had never heard of, but, was actually discussed a couple times here was, is there a maintenance clause that keeps it in good condition? Well, most of the time, or I think someone, who was it, mentioned a bond. Was it? Someone mentioned a bond last time, like a maintenance bond. Was that you, Bob? Okay. I could probably check my minutes if I wanted to.
Who's this guy here?
Oh. But I mean, that was something I've never thought of, because most of the time we just handle things through the property maintenance code. But that's a good question, and these are good not just for us to look at, I think, and provoke thought on it, but also for the public as a whole.
So conceptually, the surveys, great job. I think the way they're designed, if we were to have 10 abbreviated questions, one of them, if not the first question, do you want a fence or not, kind of dictates how far we need to go and drill down. So I understand the attention span of a typical person doing a survey, the abbreviated, I get all that, but I think if we're going to consolidate, we should really consider question 1, do you want a fence or not? And then if we're supposed to be soliciting opinions of the population, then we could look at further delineation. But this in of itself is an outline of further discussion if we get approval from the population that they want fences. So, but great job.
Well, and several of these could be structured more as sort of a declarative statement, and then you could respond, I strongly agree, I agree, I, don't have any opinion, or I know Andres will be the one who has to summarize all of the responses, and that could get more complicated. But to be able to determine whether there's any kind of nuance in how people feel about certain things versus just a yes or no. We talked about that last time, too.
Yeah. I mean,
How
there's-
difficult it is to answer the question as an absolute yes or no.
So
when
there-
it's
there's
very
45
nuanced.
questions here, and if we get down to some of the good ones that you offered, we could actually create some type of narrative that we're about to discuss this. This is what this means, so we have no vagueness on the definition of a particular term. But if we're going to, amongst ourselves, discuss and determine eventually what the top 10 questions are, if that's the number we're going after, one of them being, do you want a fence or not? So there's 9 left over. What other opinions do we need based on the directive that the board has commissioned us to do? And then leave all these, they're not throwaway. If we get approval, then everyone wants a fence, then we really got to dive into these questions and put narrative before we ask a question, in my opinion.
Just glancing at something else that I'm working on, looking at the old responses, and I don't have the 20, I think we asked in 2020, the most recent community survey, but there was this community survey in 2019 about fences that 282 people, or as part of the community survey, that 282 people answered, and in that, they asked, should residents with homes along Wolf Road be allowed to fence their yards? And then, actually not very pleased how this question was worded, but it's kind of a leading question, but, because it said, for the safety of their children and pets, it's a bit of a leading question. However, the point of it is that 70% of the people answered yes. The next question was, should all Indian Head Park residents be allowed to fence their yards should they wish to do so, excluding those covered by HOAs? And then with that one, 58% had said no. So that's a kind of a good example of what you're talking about is we can look at it as help almost delineating is, would you be in favor of fences everywhere? Would you be in favor of fences in this particular case or in this particular case? And that might be something we look at for the first survey on it, because we can then pull out more nuances of it.
That we would want to drill down and find
Yeah.
out the causals on that.
Right.
The other thing that we talked about, which when you're analyzing data, the segmentation, I think, is necessary. When you look at page 37, the map that's very colorful, which is the HOA map, I think we would want to understand somehow, some way, and I think there's opposition because I'm looking at his facial expression now, just the segmentation of who's answering the question. For instance, we were going and using Ashbrook as an example. Ashbrook would, let's say, not allow a fence at all. Do we need to survey them? Was a yes or no question that we had to struggle with at our last meeting. Or do we only survey those individuals that don't have an HOA? However it's done, I'm in favor of the segmentation, protecting the person that's answering the survey, but in a general area, where are the answers coming from so we can make a more educated decision?
And yeah, as we discussed last time, I don't see a way of it with this public opinion. We have to take the entire public's opinion. That's just in a surveying manner. That's how we have to do it. But to your point, once again, looking at this response on here, in the previous one, out of the 282 people that responded, 231 of the responses were from west of Wolf Road. Might skew the answers a little bit. But also to respond to the Ashbrook comment is we could, for Ashbrook homes, estates, I forget what the HOA is called, the Ashbrook single-family homes, we would want to survey them because yes, Ashbrook does not allow it currently, but if we were allowed fences, the board could hypothetically in the future amend the covenants to do such.
Yeah, that's my point, I think, is we discussed something about skipping certain areas, and we wanted to get to the core need of individuals that would want a fence. But I think just to be fair and equal, everyone has to have opportunities for the survey. But I still love the segmentation side of it all.
If I'm understanding that right, you're looking for kind of to start a yes or no kind of approach? And, right, to get it started, right? Do you want fences, yes or no? Well, I think there's more, give me the information maybe out there, right? Wouldn't everyone want to see all of this data first, or these questions, or whatever that is, to come to the, I don't know, this is like the debacle that we come across, right? Like, wouldn't they want to see that information first and then make the decision? Or, you know, we're kind of, our job is to kind of handhold them a little bit through this process, right? So,
I think if
Yeah, that's
the
tough.
45 questions are absolutely spot on, but if the attention span of those that create surveys for their previous careers, 45 questions, as you're saying, is way too many. So how do we abbreviate and get to the core 10, if that's the threshold limit, and then get to your point?
So this is broken down into processes, right? So you first evaluate all of the residents and get what is your feeling on fences, yes or no? And then based on that, the next part of the process is to dig deeper,
Well,
answer these questions.
I think there's a couple scenarios. There's, do you want a fence, yes or no? And if the population says no, but those that said yes, why are they saying yes? And understand that there may be some core needs that are getting washed out because of the overwhelming no's, but maybe there's a need that, as a board, we could investigate. And we might come up with some areas that are truly justified to have some type of potential amendments.
Well, and I think it also comes down to education, because we were talking about a survey plus a little bit more information on the front end. So maybe it's more of a little information packet to summarize where we are, what the lay of the land is currently, who's allowed to have fences, who we would be, who would have serious consideration for having fences because of these special conditions, and then lay that out there, and then start asking the questions like, do you find that acceptable, or are there other conditions that you would impose? So, I mean, I think it's kind of a hand-in-hand tactics.
Now that you're caught up to speed.
Right.
And the caveats that we also mentioned from a utility standpoint, drain tile, utilities, can't have a fence here or there. I think we have to manage by exception at that point. So we did discuss that at the last meeting.
And what is the timing of this versus the timing of the potential selective rezonings of some of the parcels in the village? You've mentioned something about how the zoning code update might create like a public use category or a parks and open space category, and we might actually rezone some parcels to new things. That would impact then, if we're writing a code about fences and where fences are allowed, if that's going to be an impact, we almost have to do that first, right? Versus, I don't know how we have the two things happening in parallel if they might impact one another.
So the potential zoning code changes would be the deliverables about December and adoption in January. What I will say with that is that looking at all the zoning code changes is residentials are generally going to stay the same. The only kind of tweak that might happen is they might flip R3A and R3B, because R3B is less dense than R3A, and that's just not usually how it works. But overall speaking, most of what it's doing is just condensing the current zoning classifications we have. So B1, B2, and B3 are all very similar. Well, so similar to the fact that we don't have a B1 or a B2. And so it's basically condensing those all into a one general type classification, which is like a general business classification. And then for the ones that are B5, B6, which are more the industrials, it's more of a light industrial classification. I think currently speaking, with that kind of interplay, I think our current, if we write the codes the same way we do it currently, which are how is we basically have a differentiation between residential and non-residential, the only ones that might be affected would be any place that there is governmental use properties, which would then just be Village Hall, here, Heritage Center, and then possibly our parks as well. But parks are separate from the governmental uses, but it's still a non-commercial, it's still a non-residential use. But if we only write the code to say, like, you could have a fence when your residential area is abutting either a commercial or non-residential use, or commercial use, then it wouldn't change anything, because it's still, the code is still written in such a way. Or we can tweak things a little bit here and there as we go along. If we come down a decision in December and it needs to be tweaked in January, then we can just tweak it in January to make sure it all clarifies itself out. But yeah, we're not changing massive amounts of structure of anything as coming through. It's all going to be looking the same. It's just we're just making things for the zoning code. We're just streamlining and simplifying the process. The town's pretty much going to look exactly the same. Just the colors on the maps will be a little bit different.
Excellent.
And we'll have tables.
Forgive me, we're here to talk about fences. Let's talk about fences. We can talk about zoning. I appreciate how they are related, but it doesn't sound like, based on what you described, there's much in which the fencing will influence the zoning
the new zoning
improvements that we're
wouldn't,
suggesting. So from 2019, I vaguely remember the survey. How many questions were on that survey?
There were 5 questions on that survey. One of the questions was location. So the 5 questions on that fence survey in 2019 was, question 1 was, should residents with homes along Wolf Road be allowed to fence their yards for the safety of their children and pets?
Forgive me, can you give me the results of the survey?
70% said yes, 30% said no. I will note, once again, it's a very leading question, though, with how it's phrased. Sorry, that's my professionalism. I have to tell you that. I'll give you that opinion on that. Question number 2 was, should all Indian Head Park residents be allowed to fence their yards should they wish to do so, within parentheses, note that those homes covered by HOAs may have additional restrictions. That question result was 58% no, 42% yes. So Wolf Road overwhelmingly in favor. Everywhere else, not a majority said no. Question 3 was, would you like to have an option to fence your property? 41% yes, 59% no. Question 4 was, if fencing were permitted, would you prefer restrictions as to height and materials? 80% said yes, 20% said no. And the last one, of course, was, in what area of IHP do you reside? And the answers were 5% Acacia, 3.5% Ashbrook, 82% west of Wolf Road, and 10%, I'm rounding here, so please don't excuse me, and 10% were other. So looking at that survey, and then question 6 was an open-ended question, basically said, share your thoughts, and there was 170 answers. I have not looked through all 170 answers, but there was 170 answers on that question.
So looking forward, if you believe from your expertise that 10 questions would be the limit, do we look at some collaboration between Anthony and yourself to get to the 10? Or do you have enough to go on in a consolidated form to get to the top 10?
I definitely think that, with what's provided and listening to you, that I could make a very succinct survey, with the thought being that we are going to find out if people would like fences broadly, and then possibly using the next few questions to drill down into maybe they would would they allow fences in more specific cases, specifically Wolf Road or, Plainfield, Joliet, backing up, to residential areas, or backing up to Flag Creek, these types of things. I think I could do that, and then have the all important question of which in this 3 areas are you located in: west of Wolf Road, east of Wolf Road, or south of Joliet Road? And then have an open-ended question at the end, which would basically say, "Tell me your thoughts."
Okay, so then, is it, from a timing standpoint, is it fair, given your work schedule and the to-do list that you have, to think that we could come to the next meeting with your top 10 survey questions? Or do you need help, which I'm volunteering Anthony for?
I definitely could come to the October meeting, which is October meeting, sorry. And looking at that with those questions out there. The only concern I would have is then, if we are trying to stick to our original time frame, October 7th, I think someone was saying. If we were trying to stick to our original time frame of providing a recommendation by November, that means we'd have less than 30 days in that survey. I will say, having been working on this project, I do feel like we should have a little bit more time on that, just because of the fact that there's still, as I said, I'm pulling information out of places that I still have to sort and do, and it's not just me bearing the load by myself. As I stated earlier, I've been using our front office assistant, Jill. I've been torturing our brand new intern by making him go through every single minutes and everything else as well, to do it. And if we're looking at providing, I guess the caveat here is, if we're looking at providing more education for it, more background for it, I feel like we would need more time. If we are looking at the background that I provided is adequate for that, then I do not feel like we would need more time. And either way, I can come to the next meeting with those questions, or perhaps if the commission wishes it, I could also turn those questions around and have you all give me a thumbs up and thumbs down and look at going sooner.
I think that we all need to take a step back. The schedule that we laid out was a goal. And if we hit it, we hit it. If we don't, we don't. This is a very sensitive subject. We want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure that the recommendation we give to the board is something we can stand behind collectively. So if we need more time, we just need to take the time. We also have holiday season coming up. So we want to make sure we're doing this right, getting the community engaged, and making the right recommendation. So, but that was a generic statement. I said a whole lot of nothing right there. But that being said, what is reasonable? When would make sense for us to launch on a survey beyond what the content of the survey is?
After going back to what Kat had mentioned, after we educate the public, right? That's the first step. Sending out something in the newsletter. This is happening. This is what we're considering. That needs to be presented. That's a hot month, 2 months, to let everyone absorb that information and then launch a survey from there.
Yeah, if you think of the timeline, given the fact that there's the 10 questions, you would need 4 weeks at best to come up with your consolidated question list. And then we'd have to launch from there. But the concurrent to that, from a project management standpoint, we could do the PR campaign, and then they could all coincide. And then we all talked about the timeline is a bit, it's a goal, but doing it thoroughly and right, I think, is the right approach. And if we go beyond our target date, then at least we're doing it the right way. So back to you, are you going to, is by next meeting, having the questions available to us for review, is that too much to ask?
I think I could have the question, I know I can have the questions to you for review. How much of this material that includes education, that would be hard. I'm still continuing working on all of that as well. But I definitely could have a set of 10 questions, between myself and Gavin and workshopping it and getting something together. I definitely could get that back to you by the next meeting.
Because I'm thinking of the timeline here. If 4 weeks from now is a reality, the PR campaign that runs concurrent to that might have 8 weeks to create itself, because then you would launch the survey with the content that explains what things are potentially.
Yeah, and survey, the survey window also can be longer than shorter. It doesn't have to just only be a month. It could be 2 months. It could be,
Correct, yeah.
that type of sort, depending on what it looks like. So,
Can we put this in the parking lot for a minute? I see we have a lot of folks from the public that are here. I doubt they're here to watch us talk. So, to the extent you guys have anything, I'd like to open it up for any comment, or if you guys are just here to listen, the banter, feel free to stay. I don't want to lose anybody else because he paid good money to sit here. But if anybody has anything they'd like to contribute, please join in the conversation.
yeah,
Please.
give me one moment. We need to grab you a mic real quick.
My name is Sandy Case. I live.
Just 1 second.
One moment. I gotta get you a mic so we can get you on, recorded on TV. the nice gentleman's coming up behind you. He's got you.
Test one.
No, you can put it in there. Sandy Hayes, 6634 Cochise Drive. We have a fence because we're Wolf and Joliet. That fence was there when we first came here. What is the main reason people want these fences?
I think that's partly why we're engaging in the public.
Yeah, we moved in here 50 years ago. Fences were not allowed. I like my next door neighbors. I like to be able to go back and forth through the yards to my neighbor's house. They come back and forth to our house. Our kids used to play back there, back and forth. I am so opposed to anyone blocking off that access to the beautiful landscape of the village. Totally opposed to fences. Let it be known. On page 31, it shows the yellow, those are the fences that would be on the west side of Wolf Road?
Those are the properties that are adjacent to those to Plainfield and Wolf. Not that it, and if we were allowed, that's it.
Fences.
If
That's okay. What about the Acacia side, though? Do they get fences, too?
Acacia is a planned unit development and HOA, so the Acacia HOA would have to approach us, and it would be actually for a completely different thing, would be a subdivision fence. So maybe, but not through the same path that a normal resident would go through.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. Jim Gazza, 6520 Wolf, even though we don't need to say it, board member. I guess I don't understand, Sandy, why people want fences. Because they want fences. They're paying a lot of property taxes. I feel bad for the people between you and I that have young kids that back up to Wolf. With the Wolf expansion, Plainfield Road, et cetera, everybody's got a reason, some economic. I think the gentleman that was here last time, Realtor, which I'm sure he will appear again, and he's probably watching on TV right now. But people have different opinions. But in terms of the education part, I think kind of, Bob, you kind of hit it right on the head. Fence, no fence. I think that's a pretty easy question. If no, why not? Well, it's just no. You don't really need it. If yes, what are the reasons? The reasons are protection, safety, economics, use of property. Now there's $1 million+ homes. I'm sure people would like the opportunity to use that home as they would like. I'm on Wolf Road. I don't know, fence, no fence, fence in the back. We do, Indian Head Park is called Indian Head Park for a reason, but I guess, I don't know what the education necessarily does for us. I think it's not an issue that is that complicated. When the commission says education, the education process, I think getting the survey completed, I believe you could complete a 10 to 12 question survey by the end of tonight if you really wanted to. Again, fence, no fence, the comment at the end and the 9 questions in the middle, where would we allow them, what would they look like? You don't have to figure it all out to get the survey out, I think. I think that timeline, October, is pretty good, a couple public hearings, gets you on schedule to near that data point. You shouldn't feel rushed or pressured, but we do want to get the data in. But again, we have the data from 2019. I don't think the data will look that much different, maybe a little bit, than it does now. I think probably 60-40, 50-50, plus or minus 5 or 10%. The people that care about it are west of Wolf Road. So, I guess I would encourage the committee to be mindful. Again, the education, I guess, from Diane and Bob, I don't know what that necessarily means. I think people have a pretty strong opinion. I think probably there's 40 or 50%, 45% that feel one way or the other, 40 per the other survey. It's those 20 in the middle that now with the advent of Wolf Road widening, Plainfield Road, et cetera, property values on those particular areas being significantly impacted. Even Sandy, anti-fence, but has a fence because you are on a very busy intersection, and it is a safety and protection issue, or she'd have semis driving in her backyard. So I think the timeline sounds, to me, as a public resident on the Wolf Road, I think the questions are, I think 10 to 12 is adequate. I believe that, my 3 minutes are probably up. I believe that Andres and Anthony, you guys could craft those, maybe put your top 12 or 15 and have, Survivor, kick out 5, and obviously the catch-all is the last question. The public hearings are going to flesh out some of those issues, but we're probably 40-40, and what's the 20 in the middle with the expansion of Plainfield and Wolf, and, that is kind of an unknown as well. So, again, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think the issue is that complicated that requires more education. I think we just got to get a fresh look from the community, and it's probably going to look fairly similar to, what it looked in 2019. Thank you.
Laurie Davis, 6482 Apache. I've spoken before, and I do want to reiterate the differences in the sides of the lot in the 45 acres. There's one lot that I looked up on Mohawk Court that's 7,737 square feet. Mine is 9,800. Greg, I think you're right under 10,000. So I looked up, a couple of houses in the neighborhood, but that one is really small. To put a fence around that yard or other yards around where that house is would really be pretty disastrous. So I'd like you to take that in consideration. Because the gentleman who was looking for a fence last time, he had a huge, huge lot. That makes a difference. Thank you.
I think Diane, the discussion about education, if in the question there were any terms that needed defined, I think that's probably where the education would come from, and any type of background. Why are we doing this? Why are you being asked? Which is typical of any issuance of a survey. I don't think it's, to that point, it's not too complicated there. It's like, do you want a fence or not? And then the questions beyond that. But if there's a concurrent process, like I talked about, of an education, it probably would only be fueled by some of the terminology that might be used that would cause confusion of someone answering a question.
I guess my concern would be in looking, and not particularly the survey. The survey is like I said, is get straightforward and put that. My concern would be if you're looking, once again, part of the reason why we asked about what properties could be impacted is we've discussed before that, these fences are not going to be going in drainage areas. Pretty much the entirety of the east side of Timber Ridge Court is a drainage easement. In fact, part of the drainage easement runs through buildable property on one of the houses, if you look at it. So when we're looking at these types of things, my concern would only be the fact that if we said, okay, we can have fences here, but we're not allowing them in drainage easements or utility easements. Now you start looking at, and we're not allowing them 1 or 2 feet off the property line or whatever. My concern would be, my bigger concern would be the fact that someone goes, oh, I want to vote for this, I'm going to have a fence, only to find out that then they're not going to have a fence, or their fence would be, as large as that table, for instance. And that would be, I said, that's a longer-term concern on that one. That would partly be part of the education of it, would say, okay, well, the whole not putting in a drainage or public utility easement, that is something that, even if we allow fences, that's generally not negotiable, because you don't want to impede stormwater runoff, because we have enough flooding in the village, and you don't want to be putting 42-inch posts where water mains, sewer mains, storm sewer, electrical, AT&T, Comcast is. So these are all the types of things that, like I said, my longer-term concern would be that fact that if they feel that they are going to be able to put a fence anywhere, and then when they find out they do not, that they're it almost would feel like that we are pulling a rug out from underneath them. However, that is just, I said, a longer-term concern on it, education-wise. I said, these packets are online. I've been trying to put them online as well as possible, so they're having a lot of the information, the same information. They can watch these. The minutes for these meetings, as you noticed, have gotten very long due to the fact that now I have access to the transcript and I can use ChatGPT to run it through there. So it is not like if they read these minutes, they're going to miss anything. So that also could be, if the commission feels that is sufficient, that is also could be the form of education that goes out as well. In the end, I guess to put an emphasis on it, in the end, it is what the commission feels is appropriate for education, and the process and the speed is not staff's role.
I hate to dominate the discussions here, but I think we need to get to the 10 questions, if that's our limit, and develop those as quick as possible. We could determine at any given point in time how we need to educate the population. So I'm in favor of expediting the questions.
Well, and knowing what questions we really want informed answers from the residents about would help us understand, are there key pieces of data that they need to have access to, even if it's something that says, click here if you need more information before you answer, or something, and it just takes them to the website. But something to understand what's currently allowed, and what's, some of those limitations would be that are going to govern whether a particular homeowner would ever be allowed to have a fence anyway, regardless of what the decision is for the code. Those kind of things just allow people to make a reasoned response. And then, like, to your point, not be surprised later if there's any kind of code modifications, and then they come in, they find out, well, I'm looking at your lot, and you will not actually be able to have one for the, these reasons.
So if you have the data and you have the segmentation, you could extract out those that can't have fences and then get to a more scientific number, correct?
Yes, but no.
No, come on now.
The answer to the question is yes, I could. However, to look at the information, even if I were to say, okay, the HOAs can't have any, and then I would have to look at the PUDs. But then I have to look at every single lot in the PUDs because all the lots, I'd have to look at the plat of surveys for all the lots to see where the drainage and utility easements are on every single parcel, which that's why what comes down to is yes, hypothetically I could do it, but in actuality, and no, because I'd have to look at every single lot that's not covered under an HOA, which is something like 689 or something like that.
That's a good reality check there, yeah.
I can't help but think anytime Jim comes up, I think about our mission in this thing, right? Our job is to present information for the board to review, right? So I do agree, like the questions, we could just formulate these questions. This will give us that information and then we present it to them. Or we decide, is this the information that we want to present to them? The simplicity of it, though, is kind of where I draw some issues. Like, for such a hot topic in our town, we want to give it 5 questions or 10 questions. When everyone keeps saying there's a lot to consider, but then it comes down to just like the 5, 10 questions to make some decisions off of seems, I don't know. I don't know what it seems. It seems too small to me. So I don't want to like prop myself up on my questions here. I don't mean to do that, but I guess I simply want to say we do have to be more thoughtful about these questions that we present to everyone. And as simply put, yeah.
Laurie Davis, 6482 Apache. Last time, John Corcoran had an incredible thought. What if somebody has a tree where he wants a fence? Are we going to allow people to take trees down to put in their fence? That was a really good point. John's not here tonight. It's something to think about, too. Thank you.
Any tree that is taken down in the village requires a tree permit, and for our arborist / public works director to review to be removed. And he also, as per the tree ordinance, can recommend replacement of trees. So if the tree is not diseased, or if it is not crowded out, or some other reason for it, he would not recommend taking the tree down. And in the village, if you take a tree down without a permit, it is against the municipal code. And if it's against the municipal code, it's a fine, minimally. So, in reviewing these types of permits, we could like I said, we would also be looking at whether or not there is a tree that isn't currently in the way. That's a technical question we can always review to see if they have anything in it. Most people I've seen in putting in trees tend to go around, or putting in fences tend to go around trees. But, because I mean, you got to think about taking a tree down is how many tens of thousands of dollars. You're not just popping out there with a chainsaw and having, some beers with friends. Especially most of these trees. Most of these trees, you're gonna have to call arborists or landscapers or someone to come out, and it's $8,000, $10,000, $15,000. So now you're doubling the cost of putting in a fence because you're taking a tree down. It's much easier to add an extra panel and go around your tree.
So picking up on Anthony's comment, and if we consider our board member in the audience, if the survey comes back with, multiple board members, sorry, I won't look at you anymore. Does that satisfy? I mean, if the survey comes back, no, I don't want fences, is the thought that we would stop and recommend or move forward with additional work?
Jim Gazis, board member, along with Danielle Sveska as well.
Sorry.
The commission, you're tasked to get this information and make sure the public is aware. I think, again, last month, things go on in the small municipalities and people say, we didn't know that was going on. And again, part of the education, I think a lot of it, the devil's in the details regarding how we would implement essentially a code now that says no fences except for these variances to expanding that, leaving it the same or expanding the variances, or full-blown the other way, which I don't believe the community has that desire. Again, that said, gathering the information, the commission doesn't have to make all the decisions. You're going to gather the information, have the public hearings, hear the public comments, make a recommendation based on that information to Danielle, myself, and the rest of the board. Then the board has to make a decision in terms of, what do we do with that information? What do we do with that recommendation? Follow the recommendation, change the recommendation, send it back to the Planning Commission for further review, et cetera. But really, it's going to be Andres, like you were saying, it's going to be in the execution of whatever direction the commission recommends and the board eventually decides to go. That education will come in. It will be in the code. They will come the permit for offense, and then, again, Don Morris or somebody else could do a lot of those, the easements, the right-of-ways, the sewer, the water flow, all those type of things that are big issues in the community. And again, I think Lori made a great point, one of the other residences. How do we tell somebody, those smaller houses, those smaller lots, it would be difficult to fence in a 6,000, 7,000 foot lot versus some that have 60,000, 10 times larger. But how do we tell resident A, let's say they're both on Plainfield Road, or they're both whatever. You can have one, you cannot. Or, you know what? You can have one because you have dogs and kids, but you don't, so you cannot. So again, we have to have some uniformity there. But I don't know that, again, the complexity in the education is in the implementation. I don't think that that's your job at this level. It's going to be probably Andres' job if and when, a year from now, in getting all those permits and whatever. So Anthony makes a good point. This huge decision, why are we whittling it down to 5 or 10 questions? All right, maybe it should be 15 or whatever, and the whys and the wherefores, but everybody's going to have their own opinion as to, the variance that they would want, or what they, and a lot of it will be based on what their situation is. So I believe the commission is tasked with gathering the information, making that recommendation. The education, the implementation is going to be on staff and on the community once this changes, or if it gets tweaked a little bit. So I don't know if that answers your question, Bob.
Yeah, that's it. I just want to make sure that
Danielle, anything? Are you sure?
Danielle Shveska, 11235 Hiawatha, also a board member. I second everything Jim just said. I think one thing to think about, right, and I know Jim said it, and I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but I think the board wants a baseline to go from, and then we'll take the next steps to see whatever that baseline directs us in. So just like any other ordinance that you guys get, you can review it, you can formulate your recommendation to the board will get it. We will probably have many of these conversations at the board level, probably come back to you with questions. But I think really right now what we are desiring to get from the community through you all as a commission is, what is the temperature rating on this? Or do we feel the way in 2025 that we did in 2018? Okay, cool. Have we changed? Do we need to look at things differently? So I think that's kind of the ask. And I think the quicker that we can get to acquiring that data from the public, the better off we will be to position ourselves to have intelligent conversations about what to do next.
Is the board just getting inundated with fence inquiries? Is that why all of a sudden we're having a...
Well, I mean, you guys, right, you see it too. I think it comes around every so often. It's kind of like a cyclical thing. But we have seen more people come asking questions about it. I think Andres has said that he's actually gotten a number of questions. And my opinion, which absolutely means nothing here, is that our community is changing, right? So we are getting people moving in that are at different walks of life, different scales of where they're at, and they probably want to investigate, what options they might have in the community. So I do know that the new homes on Sequoia that were built, third-hand, non-sufficient information is that one of the people that just moved in there was very upset because the realtor told her that she absolutely could put up a fence, and found out that she could not, which is on her absolutely for not investigating ordinances before you move in. But I just think that some people might not be thinking that way when they move in. So I think we're seeing an influx of changes in the community, and I think it's our role and responsibility to kind of evolve as the community evolves. So that's all I got. Thanks.
So,
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Rosentreader. I live on Pontiac. I've been here about 25 years. We're in our second home there. And we have a great big yard. At one time, I would have been like, gosh, no fences, please. It's so beautiful. We moved from a smaller property where I grew up in Western Springs and loved the open, beautiful. We have natural fences at the 2 homes we've been in. It's very private, very green. However, I'm also a realtor and agree that some people want fences, and I understand that. So jumping around a little here, the survey, by the way, now I'm more neutral on fences. I've had my 50-pound dog attacked by 2 coyotes, broke my back door. I thought I got to move somewhere where there's a fence, or I do go out with her all the time now. I was right at the door, but I couldn't get out. I have a mixed feeling now. I'm on the fence, as they say. But I love the beauty of our town. So jumping to the survey, I just ran through, checked it off. It took seconds. I know 5 or 10 questions would be great. I had no problem answering more because they impacted the way I think about a fence. An open wrought iron. I'm still not saying I'm for fences or not yet. I'm not sure. But I understand where people are coming from, but I also understand the beauty of this town. And I think that's really important to preserve no matter what happens, whatever decision is made. Privacy-wise or safety-wise along the busy streets, to me, that's a no-brainer. Those people should be allowed to have safety and have that fencing behind them. But for the rest of the yards, personally, I feel if a fence ordinance came into play, there'd have to be uniformity or we're going to have a hodgepodge mess. So anyway, that's about it.
thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I know that. They sure can.
Who are you going to ask a question to?
So in doing my research, I apologize, I was reminded of something. In doing my research, one of the things that we continually get brought up is safety. Safety of pets, safety of children, these types of things. And particularly I hear about traffic incident, versus traffic. I have not been able to find any information on any sort of traffic incidents with pets and or vehicles with vehicles striking pedestrians or vehicles striking pets on any of Indian Head Park's road. And to clarify, I mean Indian Head Park as in not Wolf Road, not Plainfield Road, not Joliet or Willow Springs. However, when discussing it with our police department, they said that most often these things, most of our data is in police. If they would be there, it would be in police reports that we'd have to go through by hand, and if we still maintain them. And then the other one is that, especially with pets, there often is no police report. So I would ask the public, members of the commission, everyone here, board members, of course, if you do have knowledge of any of those incidents, please email them to me. Because this is part of my reporting of data is when we're looking at safety information is I want to know this information if it does exist, that it does exist. Because these are also, going to the question of safety. So that was my information gathering question of the day where I could use some assistance.
I do recall in the first phase of the Wolf Road study, back when they were looking at several alternatives, it was at least a couple of years ago now, there was a traffic, study done that researched the rates of accidents and things like that along this stretch that they were studying. And I was honestly surprised how few reports there were of incidents, even vehicle accidents. It was sort of like a very, very small number of traffic incidents that occurred on Wolf. I would have expected more, to be honest, than they reported. But that report is probably, maybe 3 years old now? But that's got to be somewhere in the archives.
I know which report you're talking about. We had to
Yeah.
do it when we were doing, for our CMAP grant, for the business district and TIF district stuff, we had to provide that traffic report. As I said, these are one of those things that I don't know. For instance, the only vehicle versus pedestrian-esque incident I know of was a gentleman who was in Old Town who was riding his lawnmower, got hit by a car. But they said that wasn't brought. That was something we were talking about, speeding on Black Hawk Trail, I think it was. That he was on his lawnmower, and there was nobody was injured, and everyone was fine. It was just these are things that don't make police reports, and even if they don't make police reports, we'd like to know them because this would be part of the discussion. Thank you very much.
So for old business number 5A, do we have enough to go on that we could talk about the zoning code items on the agenda? Or do we need to talk more about the survey?
I feel I have sufficient direction and information to provide a list of questions for the survey.
Okay. Good. So, Greg, do we go on to the next item?
Well, as much spent time as we spent talking about the idea of a survey, we probably could have come up with a survey, but it's neither here nor there. We can't go back in time. Andres, can you provide us with some guidance on where you think the survey would go for our next meeting?
I believe I'd be able to bring you 10 questions that, as I kind of stated earlier, would not only
That's great.
get over temperature, yeah.
Excellent. And I'd like to offer Anthony as a resource to help you. And if it's 12 questions, 15 questions, 3 questions, I don't care. Let's have something we can beat up next session. And then can we, in the meantime, be advertising? I've seen a handful of emails go out. Hey, as a result of the fence study, we'll be issuing a survey in the coming weeks. And then we'll have the survey available for 2 weeks' time. So then in November, we can see the results of the survey. Am I being too
I guess I'm a little confused in the time frame of it, but I would definitely be able to have a survey ready for you next meeting, October 7th, but also we could start telling people that we will be on the lookout for a survey.
Excellent. So then when we all leave next meeting, we have agreed on what specific questions will be on that survey. The balance of that week, you'll polish it up and you'll launch it to the survey masters. And by November, we'll have the results of the survey.
Just in time for a public hearing, yes. Unless you wish to have the public hearing next month.
Well, you had 2 public hearings. Was that 2 public hearings, or we could have it either of these 2 months?
We just have to hold, by the resolution passed by the board, we just have to hold a singular one. I was budgeting perhaps having 2 in there, but we could have it in November.
I think we'd be all the more informed if we had the results of the survey for the public hearing. Anybody have any objections to that path forward? I'd like to go back to new business and look at the ordinance for a second. Just kidding. I'm kidding. Zoning code items to review from Safe Bill. What you got?
The remainder of the packet, which would be pages 49 to the end. Did I say 49? It must have been 47. You were right, Kat, sorry. And the zoning code, you can see, this was the agenda we discussed on, well, it wasn't August 13th, but looking at the different types of the authorities and the changes to that. You'll see these little things that say in there, say homework assignments. Those were homework assignments for us. And I'm going to ask you to also review those homework assignments for me. To share in all that, and to look at those types of tables that we have provided in there, and review those. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, please send them to me. Essentially, this is we're starting now getting into we're going from conceptual, now we're starting to get more into the brass tacks of the zoning code update. And you can see as certain comments in there from our contractor as well of certain types of things. The biggest one in here too is the noticing with a lot of the uses, because most of our uses in the residential districts were eventually just created for a specific PUD. The uses didn't continue on, so you'd have something like clustered residential being allowed in R3 and R3 and R3A, but not allowed in R3B or R4, but then it's still a special use in R5 and R6, which, should they be carried through? Probably, but because they're not explicitly in the code, the contractor wants us to make sure that those are specifically in there. So if you see a question mark in the in the uses table, it's specifically because should those uses still be allowed in there? And you can start seeing, like I said, these tables that you are starting to see in there are what's going to be eventually in the zoning code to make everybody's life a lot easier. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
So we are still keeping the R1 through R6.
Correct.
And I'm just looking at the map. Like there are 4 residential parcels that are zoned R2 in the whole village.
Correct.
Do we know why that is? Why don't we just make them R1s like their neighbors? You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing where, like, why?
They're too small. The 2 R2s down by Howard Avenue were because those two properties were one property, but subdividing them would be too small. However, they subdivided it to make it so that there's the buildable lot, and I think that was part of the reason why we got an easement in it. The other R2s that are up next to the PUD were actually originally part of the Timber Ridge PUD. Then that didn't happen for reasons I'm not quite sure. So they were basically orphaned, and so they became R2s.
Okay. I guess this is pointing out the things that aren't really coherent in the code, but I was kind of struggling with what feedback we're supposed to provide versus Safe Built recommending to us how to make this less random and more complicated than it needs to be. Like, I thought that was what they were going to be recommending to us.
They are. They're streamlining a lot of the things. The table, for instance, is going to streamline so many pages worth of work. But really, for the most part, most of the R is continually just most of it's PUD, so we can't just nullify a lot of it. When we start looking at making those R2s R1s, well, then we started running into Arrowhead Trail issues, where Arrowhead Trail, nothing actually meets R1. It's all its own very unique. That. I mean, same thing with kind of Sequoia and Hiawatha as well, too. They're just, no. I mean, we could make you R2, Diane, if that's what you
well, I mean, I guess I thought when we had them taking a comprehensive look at this, they were going to look at areas like that, like Arrowhead and Sequoia and Hiawatha, and say, if we zone those with appropriate setbacks and lot coverages and things that actually fit the actual footprint that they have, then we wouldn't have to be having all these variances coming. I mean, the impetus was that we get these variances because people come in to try to build something and they realize that the lot they have doesn't make any sense as an R1 lot, for example. So we're going through all this, but there's still going to be R1 lots
Yeah,
with the
it's going
same
to,
issues that they had before.
yeah, so a lot of the zoning code update was to make it more functional. It's definitely something we could look at, and since Safe Built will be continuing to be our, they're not a one and done. They're right now we've just kind of overloaded them with every big the big project on them, but they'll be continuing going forward. We could have them look at, the different lots and lot sizes and what should be R1s and what should be not. That's a significant project as well, which is something we could always discuss and bring to the board and see if they'd want us to do that as well. But yeah, there's a lot of properties out there, just looking at the parcel sizes, they don't make sense.
Andres, you said there's homework for us?
Yeah, so if you look at pages 46 and 47, where... 47 particularly.
I think it's 50 now.
No, it should be 47. The top of the page says Indian Head Park Zoning Code Update, August 13th, 2025 agenda. And if you read through that, it talks a little bit what we were talking about, but then in bold, in some of the areas, they say homework assignment, look at these types of things. And so that was our homework assignment for Gavin and I, and like the poor student I am throwing it all on you. No, I've reviewed them as well, but I just want, like I said, this is, as commissioners, also as residents, longtime residents or short-time residents, but people who live here and are here more often than I am, putting your eyeballs on these to see, make sure that there's nothing that I look at and go, yeah, my year and a half here, this looks right. And then Bob's like, I've been here for 30 years, that doesn't make any sense. So that's what the homework assignments were.
Got it.
Andres, I can kind of confirm that I know that Cook County, when you mentioned the table, this is how Cook County structures their zoning maps. So I guess just for the record, I've seen this before. My question is, they're adding this R3 and R3A, R3B?
No, those already currently exist.
Okay. Well, then I guess it doesn't disregard my question.
R3A and R3B are slight tweaks in Acacia for slightly denser than the previous Acacia was.
No categories have been added?
No.
No additional ones? Okay.
For those at home who are what do I mean when I'm talking about density? Density means that we are going to be, more people are going to be, or more properties and more buildings are going to be in smaller lots. So a single-family home, single-family home neighbors, Hiawatha has even though it's very small lots, has a lot less people than, Nakona over here with its 15 or whatever. Actually, that's a bad example, but the townhouses have you fit more people in townhouses than you fit people in single-family homes. So that's when density goes in. And basically, it's how much buildings, how many people are shoulder to shoulder. So we were much more dense here earlier in this meeting than we are currently now.
Good example.
I second the motion.
Well, and to go back to the question before about, are we going to create a public zone, for anything that's a government use or a park or open space use? What we're suggesting doing, there are a couple places that are zoned P2 for a park. There's no P1, there's just P2. But I guess that, what things are mapped relates then to this permitted uses. Like in a lot of codes, just the parks would just be the least dense residential category, right? And then if there was ever any consideration of making it something other than a park, there would have to be a discussion about what to zone it. Is that the way we're proceeding with some of these things, or is there going to be a park and a public category that will, like we're sitting in a building right now that's R1.
Right. So if you look at page 53, you can see where it says non-residential zones, permitted uses.
Yeah.
And OL, which is going to be the open land district, is what will be converting P1 and P2, Park 1 and Park 2. As you're right, we have no Park 1. But the issue is that if we decided to suddenly build a house right here, I don't know why we would, but if we knock down Village Hall, they could put a house here by right. There's nothing else they could do. It's Acacia, so but that's kind of the point. Is Sacagawea Park, these places when they're zoned R1 or not? Oh well, that's P. But when you have something that's just zoned R1 as the least dense, whatever that zoning is the permitted right to do it. So we could, like I said, I could put up a house if I knock down this building and put up a house, or just decide to make this my home, which kind of feels like sometimes. I could do it by right, and so by shifting some of these to the OL, the open land district, we don't have that conflict. By shifting this from being R1 into like institutional or governmental, PA, is that what it is? Oh yeah, well, that's B5, yeah. Well, basically, we're saying the only thing that can be in here is governmental type work, and then we have to have a conversation if you don't want it to be that.
So let's take a look at these homework assignments, guys, and
Email thoughts?
Yep.
What do you want? You want
Email.
responses?
Yeah, email it to me. I have a meeting with them on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. So, if you give me the information, if you have questions and all that type of sort, I can give it to them, and they can be more than happy to answer them.
excellent. Anything else on the safe build effort? If not, anything generic for the Plan Commission?
Are there specific questions about the development standards, or is it really about the permitted uses versus a special use versus just prohibiting?
Guessing they're going to get to that.
Yeah, it's mostly the uses and cleaning that up. I did recently give them the subdivision code that I had to find from 1968, and so you'll probably be seeing that. They're going to clean that up, review it, check it against state laws to make sure things are legal, and then we'll be incorporating that into the municipal code as well, because we're cleaning everything up.
So that would replace these development standards, or they are looking?
Where's the development standard? I'm looking at, sorry. No, most all this will most of this is just clean up and consolidation and making it just clearer. So these standards are still what are going to exist in there. If there's anything that's not highlighted, it's them not changing anything. It's just them putting everything into a neat table for us.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to report on board activity? Moving on to correspondence.
I don't think there's anything to report in board activity. Next Thursday night, thankfully. No, not this Thursday night.
Excellent.
This Thursday night's the Sacagawea Park public hearing, right here at 7 o'clock, probably 6 p.m. sometime. I don't know. I'm not in charge of that.
You have a building report for us?
The building report is currently, I am still trying to learn BSNA enough to get that kicked out, sorry. I wouldn't tell you that we have got a rush of permits in the last, it's also September 2nd, so, but we got a rush of permits in the last few days because everyone has seemed to realize that once the weather dropped beneath 90, that the summer is over, and oh no, my summer projects was supposed to be my summer project is now my fall project.
Do you have any commercial projects?
No, we have, everything we currently have is residential. We have nothing commercial coming and going.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, thank you all for attending. I'd like to entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion by Mr. Bellina, seconded by Mr. Minchon. All in favor of adjourning at 8:44? Aye. All opposed? Let's get out of here.
You know, y'all tired? Like.
But then you have to leave all this stuff.
This year, that's it, changing the seat.